I was just thinking of, this new government committee to rewrite a history. It's been there for 7 years now. First thing they announced when they came was Smriti Irani was the HRD minister, and she said that I may not know much, but don't judge me by my lack of education, but you judge me by my results. Now we've worked 7 years, we have not seen any results. In between we had the Minister for Culture, Mr. Sharma, I don't think he's in the government now, who said that history will start with Ramayana. Because that is also part of our history. Now if you start with mythology, God knows how much more mythology you will have in that history. So I think, and we have not had any discussion in the public domain on that at all since then. As I see it, the history of India, you and I must have educated almost same times, mostly the history of North India.
That's right.
We start with Afghanistan, Bamiyan, Buddha's there, and it ends somewhere in there, east of Pataliputra. That was the Gangetic plain, the Indus and the Gangetic plain. Gangetic plain was Bharatvarsh. Now, beyond that we don't learn anything, nor are our children taught anything, nor is there general awareness, nor is there awareness that while North was being constantly subjugated by different invaders, Central Asia, Afghanistan, Persia, wherever, even Xinjiang, because Kanishka came from the Sweshi clan in Xinjiang. So obviously, you were Tukharin. So he came to, and then became a Buddhist. We didn't notice them until they started coming as Muslims. The same people. Same Central Asians came as Rajputs, became Hindus, Agnikula, Kshatriyas. It was fine with it. But when they started appearing as Muslims, then we started taking note, called it an invasion. Anyway, the story stops there in the Gangetic plain. Nobody crossed south of the Vindhyas. First Delhi-centric ruler who might have come down south is Aurangzeb. Even Emperor Ashoka didn't come down. None of the Guptas came down. Kanishka tried to come down, Aryavarta tried to come down, they got defeated by Pulakesin at the Narmada. So, our story is never told in the south. And it's not even told to those people living outside the south, but it's not told to us. That each region has its own story to tell. So therefore I keep wondering, must we have the archaeological societies and All India Survey of India as an All India organization, or must each state have its own archaeological survey to discover its past, to unearth its culture, to write its own history? After all, we are supposed to be a composite of many nations. How can you subsume this history of many nations into one? A question which keeps bothering me. And I find that suddenly all things have gone quiet on it. There's no rewriting of history, there's no talk about it. But we are seeing a trend towards what I call, making India monochromatic. Based on Hindi, and which incidentally in East India Company language, concocted by them. There's no Hindi before 200 years ago.
Yeah.
They're all different dialects, Kadiboli and Maithili and Brajbhasha and all. So I see a new kind of a dusk descending on India. I wonder if you had any views like this, fears like I have on this here.
Mohan, you're very right. I'm not a historian.
Nor am I.
But I'm very concerned about history. And I've been a student of history. I've time and again, I go through historical treatises. I also looked up the CBSE syllabus. I looked up the NCERT books. I also looked at the course structures of various universities, both in the south as well as in the north, both public universities as well as private universities. All these observations truly bear out what you have been saying, that, they're skewed. They're more focused on Aryavarta, both ancient history as well as medieval history, and of course modern history. I'll come to that. I want to enter a caveat here. I do not want to sound as though it is north versus south. It's not. As you said, it is every region. Let me illustrate this. We hardly know anything about the Northeast. What the home kingdom, home empire, various other kingdoms in the Northeast. And even our own students, our own people in the south of Vindhyas who are fairly educated, they have no idea that we had an empire called Satavahana Empire, which extended from the banks of Krishna river, what is today called Amaravati. Those days it was called Dhammakataka. From the banks of Krishna, it extended up to what is today called Afghanistan, which then was called Gandhara. That was the extent of the empire. And it was an uninterrupted rule by a single dynasty for 400 years, from 200 BC to 200 AD, 400 years. And of course, you had starting from Cheras to Cholas to Pandyas to Pallavas to Chalukyas and the various branches of Chalukyas, the Badami Chalukyas, the Eastern Chalukyas, the Western Chalukyas, the Vengi Chalukyas, and then of course you had Rashtrakutas, you have Ikshvakus, you have Vishnukundins, all these kingdoms and dynasties, the Vijayanagara extended from Goa to Sri Lanka. These things are not in the historical imagination of, the modern India today. We are given, as you said, the Mughals, and then the Delhi Sultanate, and the Mauryas, and then the Guptas. It all centered around that.
And the Rajputs.
And the Rajputs. We are completely unaware of what is the historical significance of the Northeast.
Absolutely.
The South Indian. And look at the Chola's influence. The trade routes extended up to China.
It traded with China.
And the influence, the cultural influence, not necessarily by arms, but cultural influence is Indonesia, Burma, and the entire Far East,
Sumatra, everything.
Far
Bali.
East. So these are all completely out of the imagination of the Indian historiography, which to my mind is unfair and gives some kind of a room for a certain region to feel that they are very important in the history of India, and other parts are less significant, less important, unimportant, and insignificant.
And that is validated today by the fact that the population, say the Gangetic state, UP and Bihar, together they are 1/4 of India.
Yes.
Just two states.
Yeah.
Land mass they are small, but density of population they are high, and all their indices are low. They are always in the bottom two, and politically they are the dominant areas of the country. So in a way, the people who should not be writing our history are writing our history.
Exactly.
And that weight is being felt on us socially, culturally.
But Mohan, I also
And
want you to throw some light on why did this happen.
You see, it happened basically because we emerged as a Delhi-centric polity, except for the period when the British were ruling from Calcutta, and they also went back to Delhi. We were always a north-centric polity in the northern area. Nobody really crossed the Vindhyas. Vindhyas was like a divide, like Himalayas are between Tibet and us. Vindhyas was in those old days when you're walking by foot or by horse or by bullock carts, it was an obstacle to go through those mountains. So it didn't really reach out to us. It didn't flow easily. You know, an Akbar could ride from Kabul, come down Attock and come into Delhi in 7-8 days or 10 days. He did a march from Ahmedabad to Delhi in 9 days.
Yes.
So that was easy for them. So this was a little distance. And then in those days you didn't have great railway lines or roads. So you dominated the area around you. I was reading.
So you wrote and thought about what is in front of your eyes rather than exploring what India was.
No, but the point is the people who collated all that didn't collate us into it. So if you read any eminent historian, you read Tarachand or you read Romila Thapar, who's still alive, Irfan Habib, all their books,
Asim Majumdar,
all of them. You see, there are hundreds of historians who are listed out in the list of prominent historians of India. Very few of them have written, except for Nilakanta Shastri and a few people who wrote about the South.
Oh, Nilakanta Shastri's work is still a standard work on South India.
South India. Nobody else wrote.
Yes.
You know, I was reading Percival.
But that was in the 40s.
The glory that was India, Basham and
A.L. Basham
and Thapar. Nothing on the South. One chapter. 14 chapters on rest. And then you spoke about the Northeast. When did the Northeast come into our consciousness? Even Aurangzeb didn't go there. He tried twice. Akbar's expedition failed. Raja Man Singh was defeated at Saraighat. Only the British first went in 1626. That too, the Treaty of Yandabo with the Burmese. The Burmese were there. And
then the missionary activity.
Now, when did we keep talking about Nagaland, integral part of India? When did Nagaland come into, the Nagas come into our consciousness? So unless you understand all this, you won't have a sense of empathy with the longings of those people or want to make adjustments with them.
And even after independence, and much later after independence, immediately after independence probably, it wasn't the most pressing agenda. But once we settled down after the, partition riots and other things, 50s, 60s, 70s also, somewhere the Northeast and the South and various, even say Kalinga, Odisha and, Gujarat and, the Maratha kingdoms, they were not really explored. Marathas were a bit more explored than the South Indians, but these two parts, the East and the South, they were continued to be ignored. The historians did not turn their attention to these parts, and universities in the southern peninsula, they have also not really paid much effort and attention, because the research agenda, the research funding, the Indian Council for Historical Research, they were all somewhere biased, wittingly or unwittingly, knowingly or unknowingly, towards promoting a research agenda which explored more and more of the northern Indian and Aryavarta.
There was a geographical bias also, because at that time we were north-centric, because Hindustan or Bharat or whatever you call it started somewhere near Kabul and came down this way, and the whole of Pakistan in between. We take out the fact that today there are 220 million people there. The whole big landmass, Pakistan is pretty big geographically, was not with us. It's not with us now, but then was with us. It was an integral part of this Indian, pan-Indian consciousness, you call it. But now it's not there. So Delhi was one central to ruling India, that all other places were equidistant, more or less from it, except the south. Now Delhi is lying in the northwest in one corner, distant from all other parts of the country. So the logic of a capital there is also gone. So if you look at Delhi, now it is dominated by the people immediately around it.
That's right.
You go, even police constables in Delhi are from Haryana or from UP.
Punjab, yes.
Punjab.
Yes.
Nobody, rest of the country is not represented in Delhi at all. At one time I counted that all 7 MPs were Punjabis, came from Pakistan. Then they started getting some UP people. But the only South Indian who ever won an election from Delhi was CM Stephen.
Yeah.
From New Delhi, because they couldn't accommodate him in Kerala, so Indira Gandhi gave him a seat in Delhi. So there is no other community in Delhi. Whereas there are Bengalis there are South Indians there, large communities. Now the Biharis are coming and establishing themselves in East. And this is look at the gerrymandering. East Delhi is the biggest constituency in India.
Yes.
So all those guys are packed into one constituency.
Yes. It's almost an extension of Haryana.
So this is how these biases have been continuing in this country.
This kind of a historiography, this kind of a looking at India, looking at India's narrative, looking at India's past history, has also spilled over into the national movement narrative. Now, I was looking at the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the kind of personalities that were projected. I'm not talking about Jawaharlal Nehru, whether he's included or not, is another debate. But when we look at it from the entire country's point of view, you hardly find anybody from the northeast. You hardly find anybody from Assam. Even Gopinath Bardoloi was not included.
Not included in that, yeah.
And you have very sparse representation from the southern state, whereas the southern part of India was second to none in sacrifices and in the leading of the movement in every way. Even prior to the 1857 mutiny or the first war of independence, we had in
1806 in Vellore.
Yes, in Vellore, in Andhra province, and in Tamil Nadu, there were so many people who have revolted. The local rulers have revolted, but none of them finds a place in the historical imagination.
Absolutely, and that I think I come back to this. It comes back to the political space we occupy today in India. If you realize now, the South has only become 19% of India.
Yeah.
And it is, population-wise, is stagnating. We've all come to zero growth now.
Yes.
Karnataka is the last holdout. By 2026, that will also be zero.
The TFR is almost reached, it's reached replacement rate, and then of course it is going to come down.
So we will have these states of UP and Bihar, which will be growing till 2060, 2070 at the rate they are going. TFR of 3, Bihar and certain parts of Bihar are 5, and their HDI indexes in some 8 districts of UP are over 70%. Now, they're badly administered, they're large politically, difficult to administer. So, it becomes a weight on the whole of India.
That's right.
I think I've been telling people that this is a bigger challenge than China or Pakistan. How to get this right? Because we're talking about almost 300 million people now. The entire growth of UP alone will be equal to that of the whole of South India in the next 10 years.
Mohan, I want to take this point that you've raised a bit forward. You mentioned that why can't each state have its own archaeological survey?
Absolutely.
If you take that point forward, of course, to have an archaeological survey. They have archaeology departments in every state, but they are very ill-equipped, very underfunded, very incompetent. Then politically, they are not seen as important. But I think that kind of a sense has to be infused in the political parties and who are governing the various states.
Yeah.
It could be northeastern states, it could be South Indian states, it could be any state for that matter. That's one. The second thing is the universities that are run by the states in these different, or even central universities run in these states, will have to have a very specific historical agenda. A writing of history, researching of history, choice of topics, choice of subjects, what happened, we do not have departments of history which went into the respective areas' ancient history. Some work has been done in some universities in Tamil Nadu, but other states, they have not really gone into, what was our ancient history. For instance, if you look at, say, the Amravati Stupa, Mahachaitya, there's hardly any work which was done in Andhra Pradesh about that.
Or even the Ramappa temple.
Ramappa temple for that
And
matter.
Lepakshi.
Yes.
It all happened recently. No, the point is, here I'm going to an issue which is different. The monolithization of everything. We wanted to make education a central topic. University Grants Commission, that's the syllabus, AICTE, Indian Medical Council. All of them want to uniformize everything.
Even social sciences research,
Even social sciences.
historical research.
Yes. So I think this time has come to break this up. Let the states compete with each other. If I have to compete economically, why can't I compete in terms of education?
Exactly.
Why can't, Rajasthan offer the best education in India? And by having its own university system and syllabi, people who write syllabuses who have a system of imparting examinations.
I think syllabus will play a very important role in this.
Therefore, once you have a local syllabi writing, suppose you have Hyderabad, you can't but write about Nagarjuna, you can't but write about Ramappa or
Kakatiya dynasty.
Kakatiya, and all this. You have to do it.
Yeah.
You can even write about Vijayanagar because it's after all there's a linkage.
Yes.
Telugu rulership, though it's in Karnataka now.
That's right.
Karnataka people can write so much of history.
Yes.
Tamil Nadu can write so much of history. Now it doesn't come because it becomes one chapter. Otherwise, then one guy sitting in Delhi Historical Society, he decides that all these 19% population, they'll get one chapter.
This is one part of it. But you see, I sitting in, say, Hyderabad, or sitting in, say, Madurai, or sitting in Kozhikode, or sitting in Mangaluru, we should know something about Northeast. We should know something about the North. Similarly,
if we so desire.
Yeah. Similarly, we should know. We should know, and they should also know about. See, I do not think anybody in the Northeast, anybody in Northern India would know or heard about a kingdom or a dynasty called the Zamorin.
Absolutely. In Kerala, absolutely.
Yeah, they should know. Similarly, we should know. So there has to be an integration, but then, as you said, I think in a decentralized way, the universities will have to set their research agenda, prosecute that agenda. They should be funded well. Just because it is archaeology, just because if it is history, the governments and the political leadership should not ignore them. They should not think that it is unimportant.
We should have therefore regional education systems. That's what I'm talking about. Because after all, we are supposed to be a union of states. Look at the constitution.
Exactly.
It doesn't talk about unitary state. All the attempt has been in the last 70 years to create unitary state with one language. After all, let's not blame the BJP for Hindi. Start with the Congress party.
Exactly.
It wanted to set up Hindi Prachar Sabhas, wanted to make Hindi, till DMK and another said no, you can't bring it here. Then the South began to seethe with it, anger. It spread to Andhra and spread to Kerala. So it was put aside. Early days of the Republic. Also, now that attempt has to stop now.
True.
And that will then impinge on how are we structured economically. You have one national union, one economic union, you can call whatever you call it. Then the tax collection system also will have to change. How you appoint bureaucrats, where they go, all that will have to be we're all structured for a long colonial state. Right from, the attempt has been from the time of Emperor Ashoka to rule India from one place.
Yeah.
India cannot be ruled from one place. So India has to grow up into different cultural entities together, bound by one common civilization, not bound by one common nationality, which is not there. We are separate nationalities. So we can say we have a common civilization.
Yeah.
We derive the same kind of values, the same kind
This
of philosophy.
homogenization of identity,
Absolutely.
homogenization of national identity, religious identity, linguistic identity, I think this has to be completely opposed.
Absolutely.
This has to be pushed back. So, coming to some kind of a plan of action, I think people from different states, especially from the northeast, from the east and from the south, they should start looking at agenda, economic agenda, historical agenda, research agenda, what are the interests of the states, what are the interests of the regions, and what are the equations between the center and the states. Because you see, now increasingly the evidence is now in the public domain that the center is progressively squeezing the financial and economic powers of the states.
Absolutely. You can see that in the new trends, in the last 10 years particularly, how the states are getting less each year. When the Finance Commission says you should be getting more, we are about 20% less than what the Finance Commission says. And that shows a tendency towards centralization. Whereas we should be breaking away from that and then this whole business of the new Finance Commission with the new base of
2011
census. Completely mischievous, completely meant to reduce. Tamil Nadu has lost 6,000 crores for it, Telangana has lost 3,000 crores for it. Everybody is losing money, and you're going to get less money in terms of grants, you're going to get less money in terms of projects. Now, are we less than them? You question, I might be one small 9-district state to Telangana, but I'm a state, individual state, I have my rights. As a state, I have rights. I'm
a part of the union.
A citizen of the union.
Yes.
As a state. Now, those rights have to be respected. And I am a different person from somebody in Haryana also has to be respected. We're not the same. And the tendency to make us the same is what must be resisted. We have to be different. Our cultures have to be respected, our histories have to be respected. Therefore, I attach a lot of importance to writing our history.
That's right.
Because it's very different from their story.
That's right.
When did we get conquered from across the Vindhyas? The question I ask people and they're not able to answer, we don't know. Because they don't know.
Every time there was an attempt, it was pushed back.
Yes. I know the greatest emperor of a certain period, Aryavarta, was defeated on the banks of Narmada by Pulakesin II.
Yeah.
And Pulakesin was in turn defeated by the Pallavas. You can imagine what strength lay behind in the hinterland. The Rashtrakutas defeated the Palas. The Pratiharas were defeated by Rashtrakutas again in Gujarat.
Yes.
So all these things are not recorded in our consciousness. That we grew up separately, culturally.
So these were not the dominant themes that occupy the Indian imagination about their past.
Indian imagination is unfortunately restricted to invasions from the west or migrations. I don't even call them invasions, I call them migrations, because they all came and stayed here. The only one fellow who came and stayed and went back is the English.
Yeah.
Everybody else came and stayed. Yeah. So they're all migrations. And they all got assimilated here. So I think, therefore, this large subject of how to reorganize the union also comes out of this.
But you see, what I find, there is a trend, Mohan, that is increasingly revealing itself. Is now that there is an officially sanctioned history.
True.
Certain personalities are slowly to be faded away. Certain personalities are to be, restored, and certain personalities are shown to be not very patriotic, not very nationalist.
And certain people are shown to be what they were not.
What they were not. There are certain favored personalities.
This tendency to write history or airbrush history is a totalitarian concept. You just airbrushed a fellow, Politburo, one fellow's out, so you just airbrushed him out, the rest of the Politburo.
Even photographs are doctored.
This is the same attempt right now, because even the Congress did it in its own way. Because it was again a North-centric regime.
Yeah.
After all, let's not forget, the Congress who wanted Hindi and set up Hindi Prachar Sabha. Because even Rajgopalachari was president of Hindi Prachar Sabha. So, these guys, they eliminated whoever they didn't want. They rewrote history the way they wanted. But these people are trying to do the same thing. Now, people who were accused in the Gandhi murder case, acquittal I always means that there is lack of evidence. Does not mean there was lack of guilt. Evidence was not there to convict a person. Now, and then you had the 75th anniversary, Jawaharlal Nehru didn't feature. Whereas, for 40, 50 years, he was central to the freedom struggle. After Gandhi, it was always Nehru, not even his father.
Yes.
And it was clear from then that, he was Gandhi's most favored, trusted man. But suddenly you airbrush him out, say he doesn't exist. And then you forget that he spent 1300 days in jail.
Yes.
And you suddenly say that, he had an air-conditioned room, in social media it goes. No, this kind
That's all the WhatsApp university wisdom that
precisely,
we have.
Therefore I started getting worried when this Minister Sharma, who was MOS in culture, he was tasked with rewriting our history. So he said, I'm going to start with the Ramayana. Now, how are you going to explain the androids? How are you going to explain away the monkeys in carrying stones? Are you going to say this is how we viewed our tribals, or this is how we viewed South Indians? So it's getting into areas where we shouldn't be getting into. We should be looking at evidence. After all, it's we who forgot Ashoka, and the East India Company discovered him for us. Prinsep discovered him. He was an officer in the Mint. He discovered Priyadarshini, Emperor Priyadarshi.
Yes.
And the stupas, and said, this is what the stupas are about. These are all the pillars are about. Yes. Deciphered Brahmi. So I think we should...
Even Amravati stupa was discovered by Mackenzie.
Absolutely. We should now get a consciousness of this history. And let's not just throw everything saying that some Englishman wrote it. They didn't write it with it. They were pursued curiosity according to what they saw. They didn't come here as part of a great design to say that, let's give these people a history. We lost our history because we went into the oral tradition.
Yes.
Or not recording things.
Oh, you see, there are different kind of things. And certain civilizations have written it down. Certain civilizations
haven't
carried it orally forward. Even our greatest scriptures were orally transmitted from one generation to the other generation. So I think the especially the eastern and southern parts of the country will have to focus their attention anew on their history, the way the history is written, the way historical research agenda is decided, funded, the way the archaeological monuments and archaeological survey are conducted and preserved and properly funded. I think this has to become some kind of an important agenda for all these states.
And it can be best done by the states themselves.
Yes.
Because they also have a vested interest in projecting their own cultures. And so I think, therefore the decentralization must start with these monoliths. Looking after culture, looking after education. Syllabuses. These have to be broken up.
Yes.
I don't think there should be a syllabus for BA in history being set in Delhi for the whole country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, all reading the same nonsense. You know, I think everybody is entitled to their own history. So let's give it to them.